I never thought my own sister would try to kill me at my 28th birthday party. The chocolate cake hit my face with such force that I stumbled backward, my head striking the hardwood floor with a sickening crack. Blood immediately began mixing with the vanilla frosting as it dripped down my forehead. Jessica stood over me, her laughter echoing through our parents' dining room, while I lay there dazed and confused. Everyone around the table just stared for a moment before my dad, Robert, chuckled and said it was typical sibling behavior. My girlfriend Sarah helped me sit up, but when I suggested going to the hospital because of the throbbing pain in my skull, my mother Linda waved her hand dismissively and insisted I was overreacting to harmless birthday fun. The next morning, I woke up with the worst headache of my life. My vision kept blurring, and I felt nauseous every time I tried to stand. Sarah had already left for her nursing shift at the pediatric clinic, so I drove myself to St. Mary's Hospital emergency room. The fluorescent lights made my head pound even worse as I checked in with the receptionist. Dr. Patricia Williams, a woman in her early 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, examined me thoroughly. She pressed gently around my scalp, asking detailed questions about the previous night's incident. When I described how Jessica had smashed the cake into my face, Dr. Williams frowned and ordered immediate CT scans and X-rays. 30 minutes later, she returned with a folder full of images and a grave expression. She clipped the X-rays to the light board and studied them for several long moments before turning to face me. "Addison, I need to ask you something important," she said, her voice careful and measured. "Have you ever suffered serious head injuries in the past?" I shook my head, which made the pain spike again. "No, nothing major. Maybe a few bumps playing sports in high school, but nothing that required medical attention." Dr. Williams pointed to 3 distinct areas on my skull X-ray. "These images show healed fractures from 3 separate incidents. This one here," she indicated a line near my right temple, "appears to be from early childhood, probably when you were 6 or 7 years old. This second fracture along the back of your head looks like it occurred during your pre-teen years. And this third one, just above your left ear, seems to be from your teenage period." My stomach dropped as I stared at the ghostly images of my own skull. That's impossible. I would remember breaking my skull 3 times. "Head trauma, especially in children, can sometimes cause memory gaps," Dr. Williams explained. "But what concerns me most is the pattern. These aren't typical childhood accident injuries. The angles and force required to cause these specific fractures suggest repeated blunt force trauma from deliberate impacts." She walked over to her desk and picked up her phone. "I'm required by law to report suspected cases of domestic violence, even if they occurred in the past. I'm calling Detective Torres from our domestic violence unit." As she dialed, a cold realization began washing over me. 3 separate skull fractures I couldn't remember. Jessica's violent cake attack the night before. The way my family always dismissed her aggressive behavior as harmless sibling rivalry. My hands started shaking as suppressed memories began stirring in the depths of my mind, like disturbed sediment in a muddy pond. Detective Raymond Torres arrived within 20 minutes. He was a stocky man with kind eyes and a mustache that reminded me of my high school gym teacher. He reviewed the medical evidence with Dr. Williams before sitting down next to my hospital bed. "Addison, I know this is difficult, but I need you to think carefully about your childhood," he said gently. "Sometimes our minds protect us from traumatic memories by burying them deep. Can you remember any incidents where your sister might have hurt you, even if your family said they were accidents?" I closed my eyes and tried to push past the mental fog. Slowly, like pieces of a shattered mirror reassembling themselves, the memories began returning. The first memory hit me like a physical blow. I was 7 years old, standing at the top of our basement stairs. Jessica was behind me, her 12-year-old face twisted with anger, because I had accidentally broken her favorite doll while playing in her room. She placed both hands on my back and shoved with all her strength. I tumbled down 15 wooden steps, my head bouncing off each one before finally slamming into the concrete floor at the bottom. I remember now, I whispered to Detective Torres, my voice barely audible. The basement stairs. Jessica pushed me because I broke her doll. But when my parents found me unconscious at the bottom, she told them I had slipped on a toy truck. Detective Torres nodded encouragingly. What about the second injury Dr. Williams said it appears to be from your pre-teen years? Another memory surfaced, this one from when I was 11. Jessica was 15 and had been practicing her softball swing in our backyard. I was reading a comic book under the oak tree about 20 feet away. She called my name, and when I looked up, she swung the aluminum bat in a perfect arc that connected with the left side of my head. The impact knocked me unconscious instantly. She said it was an accident. I told Detective Torres the memory now crystal clear. She claimed she didn't see me when she was practicing her swing. My parents believed her because I was sitting behind her. But I remember her calling my name first. She made sure I was looking before she hit me. And the third injury, Dr. Williams asked softly. The final memory was the most vivid. I was 16 riding my bike home from my part-time job at the grocery store. Jessica had been waiting in her car at the corner of Maple Street near the concrete drainage ditch that ran alongside the road. As I pedaled past, she gunned her engine and swerved directly into me. The impact sent me flying off my bike and headfirst into the ditch wall. She told the paramedics that I wasn't paying attention and rode into traffic. I said, my voice growing stronger as the full picture became clear. But she was waiting for me. She planned it. Detective Torres leaned forward. Addison, what you're describing suggests that your sister has been systematically abusing you since childhood. The fact that each incident was explained away as an accident indicates either willful blindness or active cover-up by your family. Dr. Williams pulled up a chair and sat down facing me. Based on the pattern of injuries and your recovered memories, I believe your sister may have antisocial personality disorder. People with this condition can be extremely manipulative and lack empathy for their victims. They're often skilled at making their violent behavior appear accidental or justified. The room felt like it was spinning as the full weight of 21 years of systematic abuse crashed down on me. Jessica hadn't been a difficult sibling or overly aggressive sister. She had been trying to seriously harm me my entire life, and my parents had helped her cover it up. There's something else? I said suddenly, remembering a pattern I had never connected before. Every time I got hurt, Jessica seemed happier afterward, like she was satisfied. And my parents always took her side no matter how obvious it was that she had caused the injury. Detective Torres stood up and closed his notebook. I'm going to need you to come to the station tomorrow to file a formal report. We'll also need to interview your family members. Based on what you've told me and the medical evidence, we have grounds for a serious investigation. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Williams turned back to me. Addison, I want you to understand something important. What happened to you wasn't normal sibling rivalry. It was systematic abuse. The fact that you survived 3 skull fractures and are sitting here talking to us today is frankly miraculous. That night, lying in my apartment with an ice pack on my head, I couldn't stop thinking about all the other times Jessica had hurt me in ways I had dismissed or forgotten. The mysterious bruises that appeared after family gatherings, the stomach problems I always had after eating her cooking, the accidents that always seemed to happen when we were alone together. I called Sarah and told her everything. She listened in shocked silence before admitting that she had always felt uncomfortable around Jessica, but hadn't wanted to interfere in family matters. I should have said something, Sarah said through tears. I could see how mean she was to you, but your family always acted like it was normal. I thought maybe I was overreacting because I'm an only child. As I hung up the phone, I realized that tomorrow's confrontation with my family would either bring justice or destroy what was left of my relationship with them forever. But for the first time in my life, I finally understood why I had always felt unsafe in my own home. The next afternoon, Detective Torres accompanied me to my parents' house on Elm Street, the same house where I had suffered years of abuse while everyone looked the other way. Sarah drove separately and waited in the car, ready to call for backup if needed. My parents and Jessica were waiting in the living room when we arrived. Jessica sat in her usual spot on the cream-colored sofa, her arms crossed and her expression defiant. She had always been the golden child, homecoming queen honor student married to successful Marcus, who worked in pharmaceutical sales. At 33, she still carried herself with the entitled confidence of someone who had never faced consequences for her actions. "This is ridiculous," Jessica announced before I could even sit down. "Addison has always been clumsy and accident-prone. Now he's trying to blame me for his own problems." Detective Torres spread the X-ray images across my parents' coffee table. The evidence was undeniable. 3 clear skull fractures from 3 separate incidents. "These injuries show a pattern of deliberate trauma," he explained to my parents. "Your son has recovered memories of each incident, and in every case, Jessica was directly responsible." My father, Robert, a thin man with graying hair who had spent 30 years building his accounting firm's reputation, shifted uncomfortably in his recliner. "Detective, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Children get hurt. It's part of growing up. Dad." She pushed me down the basement stairs when I was 7. I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "She hit me with a softball bat when I was 11. She ran me off my bike with her car when I was 16. These weren't accidents." My mother, Linda, who prided herself on being a pillar of First Baptist Church and head of the Ladies' Auxiliary, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "Addison, honey, you know Jessica would never intentionally hurt you. You two have always roughhoused. Maybe you're remembering things differently because of your head injury." Jessica smirked at her mother's support. "See, even Mom knows you're making this up. You probably gave yourself that concussion by drinking too much at your own party." "I was stone sober," I replied firmly. "And you calculated exactly where to hit me, so I would fall backward onto the hardwood floor." Detective Torres pulled out his tablet and showed them security footage from a neighboring house that captured part of the birthday party through the dining room window. The video clearly showed Jessica winding up like a pitcher before driving the cake into my face with tremendous force. "This wasn't playful behavior," Detective Torres pointed out. "She struck him with enough power to cause serious injury, and the angle suggests she was aiming for maximum damage." For the first time, my parents looked genuinely shaken. They watched the video several times in silence while Jessica's confident expression began to crack. "Fine," Jessica snapped suddenly. "Maybe I hit him harder than I meant to, but he's always been a crybaby. Even when we were kids, he would run tattling to Mom and Dad about every little thing." "Every little thing," I stood up, my voice rising. "You broke my skull 3 times, Jessica. That's not sibling rivalry. That's attempted murder." "Don't be so dramatic," she shot back. "If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead." The words hung in the air like a confession. Detective Torres immediately wrote something in his notebook while my parents stared at their daughter in horror. My mother broke the silence first. "Jessica Marie, what did you just say?" "Nothing, Mom. I was just pointing out how ridiculous Addison's accusations are." But Detective Torres wasn't finished. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Were you aware of your daughter's violent behavior towards your son?" My parents exchanged a long look before my father finally spoke. "There were incidents over the years. Jessica always had a temper, especially toward Addison. But we thought it was normal sibling competition." "Normal?" I laughed bitterly. "Dad, you found me unconscious in the basement with blood pooling under my head. Mom, you saw Jessica hit me with a baseball bat hard enough to knock me out. How is any of that normal?" My mother began crying harder. "We sent Jessica to therapy when she was in middle school. The counselor said she had some behavioral issues, but we thought she had outgrown them." "What kind of behavioral issues Detective Torres asked. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. She was expelled from Jefferson Elementary for attacking a classmate with scissors. Then she was suspended from Roosevelt Middle School for pushing a girl down the stairs. Finally, we had to pull her out of Lincoln High and send her to private school after she was caught putting bleach in another student's water bottle. And you never connected this pattern to what was happening to Addison at home? Detective Torres asked incredulously. The therapist said Jessica was acting out because she felt overshadowed by Addison's academic achievements, Linda explained weakly. She recommended family counseling, but Jessica refused to participate. Actually, Robert added quietly, Dr. Matthews recommended residential treatment. She said Jessica showed signs of conduct disorder that could develop into antisocial personality disorder. But we couldn't afford to send her away, and we were worried about what people would think. The room fell silent as the full implications sank in. My parents had known Jessica was dangerous. They had professional recommendations to get her help. But they chose their social standing over their son's safety. You let her keep hurting me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You knew she was dangerous, and you let her keep hurting me to protect your reputations. Just then, Marcus walked through the front door. Jessica's husband was a tall man with kind eyes, who had always treated me with genuine warmth. He stopped short when he saw Detective Torres and the X-ray images spread across the table. What's going on here? He asked, looking confused. Detective Torres explained the situation while Marcus's face grew increasingly pale. When the detective finished, Marcus sank into a chair and put his head in his hands. I've seen her hurt Emma and Tyler, he whispered, referring to their 6-year-old daughter and 4-year-old son. She pinches them when she thinks no one is looking. Last week, I found bruises on Emma's arm after she spilled juice on Jessica's laptop. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. Marcus looked up with tears in his eyes. Jessica threatened to take the kids away from me if I ever reported her. She said she would tell the courts I was abusing them and that no judge would believe a man over a mother. I was terrified of losing them. Detective Torres stood up and reached for his handcuffs. Jessica Henderson, you're under arrest for aggravated assault, child endangerment, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent. But as he approached her, Jessica suddenly lunged across the room toward the fireplace tools. She grabbed the heavy iron poker and swung it at my head with the same calculated precision she had used with the cake. I dove sideways and the poker smashed into the wall where my head had been just seconds before. Detective Torres tackled Jessica to the ground while she screamed about the family money belonging to her and how I had always been their favorite. As the handcuffs clicked into place, I finally understood that this wasn't just about sibling rivalry or even mental illness. Jessica had been systematically trying to eliminate me because she saw me as competition for our parents' inheritance and attention. The birthday cake incident hadn't been a spontaneous outburst. It had been the latest attempt in a decades-long campaign to either kill me or drive me away from the family permanently. Standing in my childhood living room, watching my sister being arrested while my parents wept on their sofa, I realized that my real family wasn't the people who shared my DNA. My real family was Sarah waiting in the car outside and the few friends who had always supported and protected me. The people in this house had spent 28 years failing to keep me safe, and I finally understood that walking away wasn't abandonment. It was survival. 3 days later, Detective Torres called me with news that made my blood run cold. The investigation had expanded far beyond simple assault charges. Lab results from my blood work revealed something that changed everything. Addison, we found elevated levels of ethylene glycol in your system, Detective Torres explained over the phone. That's antifreeze. Someone has been poisoning you. I nearly dropped my phone. Poisoning me? How is that possible? We tested stored blood samples from your previous emergency room visits over the past 18 months. Every sample shows trace amounts of antifreeze poisoning. It's been happening gradually, which is why you never experienced acute symptoms that would have been immediately recognizable. The pieces began falling into place like a horrifying puzzle. The monthly family dinners where Jessica always insisted on serving my drink. The mysterious stomach problems I always had afterward. The fatigue and headaches that I attributed to work stress. She's been trying to kill me slowly. I said more to myself than to Detective Torres. It appears that way. Ethylene glycol poisoning causes kidney damage, neurological problems, and eventually death if administered consistently over time. The fact that you're still alive suggests she was either being cautious about dosage or wanted you to suffer before you died. Sarah, who had been listening on speakerphone, grabbed my hand tightly. How long has this been going on? Based on the blood test timeline, approximately 18 months. That coincides with when your grandfather passed away, correct? Yes. I answered, confused about the connection. Grandpa William died of heart failure about a year and a half ago. Jessica was taking care of him during his final months. We need to talk about your grandfather's death, Detective Torres said grimly. Can you meet me at the station this afternoon? At the police station, Detective Torres introduced me to Dr. Stephen Chen, the county medical examiner. Dr. Chen was a serious man who spoke with the precision of someone accustomed to presenting evidence in court. Based on the pattern of poisoning we've discovered in your case, we obtained a court order to exhume your grandfather's remains, Dr. Chen explained. The preliminary autopsy results are deeply concerning. He showed me a toxicology report filled with numbers and chemical names I didn't understand. Your grandfather's preserved tissue samples show lethal concentrations of digitalis, a heart medication that can be fatal in large doses. He was being slowly poisoned with his own heart pills. Jessica was giving him his medication every day. I said, the full horror dawning on me. She said it was too complicated for him to manage himself after his stroke. Detective Torres opened a thick file folder. We also searched Jessica's house with a warrant. We found detailed internet search histories on her computer going back 3 years. She researched untraceable poisons, inheritance laws, traumatic brain injury symptoms, and life insurance policies. He handed me printed pages of Jessica's search history. The queries were chilling in their calculated precision. How much antifreeze to cause organ failure? Undetectable ways to cause head trauma. How long does digital fingerprint evidence last? Average settlement for accidental death claims. There's more, Dr. Chen continued. We found your grandfather's stolen prescription pain medications hidden in Jessica's bedroom closet. Street value of approximately $8,000. She was selling them while slowly killing him. Sarah squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. She murdered him for his inheritance money. It appears so, Detective Torres confirmed. Your grandfather left Jessica $50,000 in his will. She used that money as a down payment on her house. But according to family financial records, she also contacted your life insurance company 2 weeks before your birthday party. He handed me another document, an inquiry form from my insurance company requesting details about my policy beneficiaries and coverage amounts. She asked specifically about accidental death benefits, Detective Torres explained. Your policy would pay out $400,000 if you died from an accident before age 30. Combined with your expected inheritance from your parents' estate, Jessica would have gained over $600,000 from your death. The room felt like it was spinning as I processed the scope of Jessica's long-term plan. She hadn't been acting impulsively or suffering from uncontrolled anger. Every incident had been carefully calculated to either kill me outright or weaken me enough that a final accident would be believable. The birthday cake attack wasn't random violence, I said slowly. She was trying to cause a fatal head injury that would look like an accident. Exactly, Detective Torres confirmed. If you had died from that head trauma, it would have appeared to be a tragic accident during a family celebration. Jessica would have been the grieving sister, and no one would have suspected murder. Dr. Chen pulled out additional files. We're also investigating 3 other suspicious deaths connected to Jessica. Her college boyfriend died in a hiking accident after dating her for 6 months. A co-worker died from food poisoning after a company picnic where Jessica provided the catering. And her first husband's death in a car accident is being reviewed because the brake lines had been tampered with. First husband? I asked, confused. Marcus is her second marriage. Detective Torres nodded. She was married to David Chen. No relation to Dr. Chen here. For 2 years before he died. She inherited his life insurance policy and his share of a small business. That gave her enough money to start fresh and eventually meet Marcus. The investigation was revealing Jessica as a serial killer who used her charm and family connections to avoid suspicion. She had been perfecting her methods for over a decade, learning from each murder how to be more careful and more convincing. What happens now? Sarah asked. District Attorney Michael Rodriguez is filing charges for first-degree murder, attempted murder, aggravated assault, elder abuse, resulting in death, child endangerment, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder, Detective Torres explained. Based on the evidence, we're looking at life in prison, without the possibility of parole. As we prepared to leave the police station, Detective Torres pulled me aside. Addison, I want you to understand something. What Jessica did to you wasn't just about money or inheritance. People with antisocial personality disorder often target family members because they're convenient victims who trust them. She saw you as an obstacle to her goals, not as a human being deserving of love and protection. That night, lying in bed next to Sarah, I couldn't stop thinking about all the years I had blamed myself for the tension in my family. I had thought I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too quick to assume the worst about Jessica's intentions. Now I understood that my instincts had been right all along. The person I had been taught to love and trust as family had been systematically trying to kill me since childhood. But I also realized something else. Despite everything Jessica had done, despite the years of physical and psychological abuse, despite the poisoning and attempted murder, I had survived. I was still here, still breathing, still capable of love and trust and hope. And now finally justice was coming for the person who had tried to destroy me. 2 weeks into the investigation, Detective Torres called with news that shattered what remained of my faith in my family's integrity. The district attorney's office had been digging deeper into Jessica's background, and what they found was beyond anything I could have imagined. We need to meet at the courthouse, Detective Torres said urgently. There's something about your grandfather's death that you need to hear directly from the medical examiner. At the courthouse, Dr. Stephen Chen looked exhausted. He had been working around the clock to process evidence from what was now being called one of the most complex serial murder cases in the county's history. The exhumation results are conclusive. Dr. Chen began without preamble. Your grandfather didn't die from natural heart failure. He was systematically poisoned with digitalis over a period of approximately 4 months. He showed me a timeline chart that mapped out Grandpa Williams' decline. Jessica was increasing the dosage gradually to avoid suspicion. The levels in his tissue samples indicate she was giving him nearly 10 times his prescribed dose during his final weeks. But why would she kill him? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Detective Torres opened a financial records file. Your grandfather was worth more than your family realized. Beyond the $50,000 Jessica inherited, he had a secret savings account containing another $200,000. Jessica discovered this account when she was managing his finances. She forged his signature on withdrawal slips, Dr. Chen continued. Over 3 months, she transferred the entire amount into her own accounts. She planned to claim the money was payment for her caregiving services if anyone questioned the transactions. Sarah, who had become my constant support through this nightmare, shook her head in disbelief. She stole $250,000 from a dying old man. The theft was methodical, Detective Torres explained. Jessica researched elder financial abuse laws to find loopholes. She made the withdrawals in amounts small enough to avoid automatic bank reporting requirements. She even had your grandfather sign blank checks during his more confused moments. But the financial crimes were only the beginning. Detective Torres handed me another file folder, this one marked with red tape indicating highly sensitive material. "We found something else during our investigation of Jessica's computer," he said gravely. "She's been documenting her crimes in digital journals apparently for her own entertainment." He opened a laptop and showed me files labeled with dates going back 15 years. Jessica had been keeping detailed records of every person she had hurt or killed, complete with photographs, timelines, and her own commentary about the experience. She wrote about poisoning your grandfather like it was a science experiment. Detective Torres said, his voice tight with controlled anger. She documented how long it took for each dose to take effect and described his symptoms like she was conducting research. The journal entries about me were the most disturbing. Jessica had been planning my death since I turned 18 and became eligible for inheritance benefits. She had calculated different scenarios, making my death look like suicide staging accidents, even considering hiring someone to kill me and make it appear to be a random crime. "Listen to this," Detective Torres said, reading from one of her entries. "Addison is getting suspicious about the monthly dinners. I need to increase the antifreeze dosage, but make sure he doesn't taste it. Maybe I should switch to something flavorless. The head trauma plan is still the most reliable option. One good fall could finish what I started in childhood." Dr. Chen pulled out crime scene photographs from our grandfather's bedroom. "She also photographed your grandfather's deterioration. She was proud of her work." The photos showed Grandpa William in his final days, gaunt, confused, clearly suffering from organ failure. Jessica had captioned them with timestamps and notes about his symptoms. She had treated his murder like a personal achievement. "There are similar documentation for her other victims," Detective Torres continued. "David, her first husband, suspected she was having an affair, so she loosened the lug nuts on his car wheels. She wrote about watching the news coverage of his accident and feeling satisfied that the investigation ruled it mechanical failure. The co-worker who died from food poisoning was named Jennifer Martinez," Dr. Chen added. "She had been promoted to a position Jessica wanted. Jessica brought potato salad to the company picnic laced with salmonella bacteria she cultured herself. Jennifer died 3 days later from sepsis." Sarah had gone pale listening to these revelations. "How many people has she killed?" "We're investigating 7 suspicious deaths connected to Jessica over the past 15 years, Detective Torres answered. "But based on her journals, there may be more. She started experimenting with different methods when she was in college." The scope of Jessica's crimes was staggering. She wasn't just a violent sibling or someone who had snapped under pressure. She was a methodical serial killer who had been perfecting her techniques for over a decade. "Her psychology evaluation came back yesterday," Detective Torres continued. "Dr. Maria Gonzalez from the State Psychiatric Hospital confirmed our suspicions. Jessica meets all the criteria for antisocial personality disorder with psychopathic features. She shows no empathy, no remorse, and views other people as objects to be manipulated or eliminated." "What about Marcus and the children?" I asked, suddenly worried about their safety. "Marcus filed for emergency divorce and custody yesterday," Detective Torres assured me. "The children are staying with his parents in another state until the trial is over." We also found evidence that Jessica was beginning to poison Marcus slowly, probably planning to make herself a wealthy widow. The investigation had revealed Jessica as one of the most dangerous criminals in the state's history. She had been hiding in plain sight, protected by her charming facade and her family's refusal to acknowledge her true nature. But there was one more revelation that Detective Torres had saved for last. He handed me a legal document marked with the State Attorney General's seal. "Your parents are being investigated for criminal negligence and accessory after the fact he said quietly. They knew Jessica was dangerous, they had professional recommendations to get her help, and they actively covered up her crimes to protect their own reputations. The document outlined charges against Robert and Linda Henderson for failing to protect a minor child from known abuse, obstruction of justice, for helping Jessica cover up the childhood incidents, and potentially aiding and abetting in the grandfather's murder by giving Jessica unrestricted access to his care. They could face up to 20 years in prison, Detective Torres explained. The district attorney is still deciding whether to offer them a plea deal in exchange for their testimony against Jessica. Sitting in that courthouse conference room surrounded by evidence of my sister's systematic evil and my parents' complicity, I felt like my entire life had been built on lies. The family I thought I knew didn't exist. The love and protection I should have received had been sacrificed to maintain appearances and avoid difficult truths. But I also felt something else growing inside me. Not just anger or sadness, but a fierce determination to make sure Jessica could never hurt anyone else again. She had taken my grandfather's life, stolen years of my own life, and traumatized countless other victims. Now it was time for her to face the consequences of 2 decades of carefully calculated evil. The trial was still months away, but I was already preparing to testify against the person who should have been my protector and had instead been my predator. For the first time in my life, I was going to fight back, not just for myself, but for every person Jessica had hurt and every future victim she would never have the chance to claim. 3 months later, Jessica's arraignment hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in Judge Patricia Morrison's courtroom. District Attorney Michael Rodriguez had filed a comprehensive case that included first-degree murder charges for Grandpa William's death, attempted murder for the antifreeze poisoning, aggravated assault for the birthday cake incident, and multiple counts of fraud related to the stolen money and forged documents. Sarah and I arrived at the courthouse early, wanting to see Jessica face formal charges for the first time since her arrest. Marcus was there too, having driven down from his parents' house where he was staying with Emma and Tyler, while the legal proceedings unfolded. I still can't believe I was married to a serial killer for 5 years, Marcus said quietly as we waited in the hallway outside the courtroom. I keep thinking about all the times she was alone with the kids, all the family barbecues where she handled the food, all the nights I slept next to someone who was planning to murder me. Jessica's defense attorney, a well-dressed woman named Catherine Phillips, had tried unsuccessfully to get the charges reduced or dismissed. The evidence against Jessica was overwhelming: physical proof, digital documentation, witness testimony, and her own recorded statements during police interviews. When the bailiffs brought Jessica into the courtroom, I barely recognized her. Gone was the confident, charming woman who had dominated family gatherings with her magnetic personality. She looked thin and hollow-eyed, her hair hanging limp around her shoulders. But when she saw me sitting in the gallery, her expression shifted to one of pure hatred. Judge Morrison, a stern woman in her 60s, with silver hair and piercing eyes, reviewed the charges methodically. As she read each count aloud: murder in the first degree, attempted murder, aggravated assault, elder abuse, resulting in death, fraud, conspiracy. Jessica's face remained blank and emotionless. "How does the defendant plead to these charges?" Judge Morrison asked. "Not guilty, Your Honor," Catherine Phillips answered for her client. But as the judge began explaining the legal procedures and scheduling preliminary hearings, something unexpected happened. Jessica suddenly stood up from the defendant's table, ignoring her attorney's attempts to make her sit down. "This is all lies," Jessica announced loudly, her voice echoing through the courtroom. "Addison has always been jealous of me because I was the successful one, the pretty one, the one everyone loved. He's making up these stories because he can't stand that I was always better than him." Judge Morrison banged her gavel sharply. "Ms. Henderson, you need to remain seated and let your attorney speak for you." But Jessica was just getting started. Years of carefully controlled behavior were finally cracking under the pressure of facing consequences for her actions. "I never hurt anyone," she continued, her voice rising to a shout. "Grandpa died because he was old and sick. Addison got hurt because he was clumsy and weak. I'm the victim here. My own family is trying to destroy me because they can't handle the truth about themselves." Bailiff Thomas Jackson approached the defendant's table, ready to restrain Jessica if necessary, but she had one more outburst left in her. "The money should have been mine anyway," she screamed. "I was the one who took care of everyone. I was the one who made sacrifices. Addison never deserved any of it, and now he's trying to steal what's rightfully mine." Judge Morrison had heard enough. "Bailiff Jackson, please remove the defendant from my courtroom. Ms. Phillips, you need to have a serious conversation with your client about appropriate behavior during legal proceedings." But as Bailiff Jackson reached for Jessica's arm, she spun around with surprising speed and lunged towards the gallery where I was sitting. Somehow she had managed to conceal a small ceramic knife, later determined to be a sharpened piece from a broken coffee mug, that she had hidden in her clothing. "You ruined everything," she screamed, swinging the makeshift weapon at my throat. "It should have been you who died, not Grandpa. It should have always been you." Time seemed to slow as I watched the blade arc toward my neck. But Bailiff Jackson, a former Marine with lightning reflexes, tackled Jessica to the ground just before she could complete her attack. The ceramic knife clattered across the marble floor as other bailiffs rushed to assist. Sarah grabbed my hand tightly as we watched Jessica being subdued and handcuffed. Even with 3 grown men restraining her, she continued screaming threats about finishing what she started and making sure I never inherited a penny of the family money. Judge Morrison's face was pale with shock as order was restored to her courtroom. In 30 years on the bench, I have never witnessed such a brazen attack during an official proceeding. "Ms. Henderson, you have just demonstrated exactly why you need to remain in custody without the possibility of bail. The attempted courthouse murder provided the prosecution with additional charges and irrefutable proof of Jessica's ongoing dangerousness. Any hope her defense attorney might have had of portraying her as mentally ill rather than criminally responsible had just been destroyed by Jessica's own actions." "Your Honor," District Attorney Rodriguez said, rising to address the court, "the state requests that the defendant be immediately transferred to maximum security custody and placed on suicide watch. Her behavior today demonstrates that she poses an ongoing threat not just to the victims and their families, but to the integrity of these proceedings." Catherine Phillips, looking defeated, requested a brief recess to speak with her client. But Jessica was no longer interested in legal strategy or plea negotiations. As the bailiffs led her away, she turned back to look at me one final time. "This isn't over," she said, her voice cold and calculating despite the handcuffs. "Even if I go to prison, I'll find a way to make you pay. I always finish what I start." Judge Morrison scheduled a competency hearing to determine whether Jessica was mentally fit to stand trial, but the psychiatric evaluation would ultimately conclude that she was fully aware of her actions and capable of understanding the legal proceedings. Her outburst had been an act of rage and desperation, not mental illness. Over the following weeks, media coverage of the case attracted national attention. Jessica's story became a cautionary tale about family dysfunction, the warning signs of psychopathy, and the importance of taking domestic violence seriously, even when it occurs between siblings. But for me, the most significant moment came when Marcus approached me after the hearing. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. "I saw how she treated you at family gatherings, and I should have said something. I should have protected you the way I'm protecting Emma and Tyler now." "You couldn't have known how dangerous she really was," I replied. "She fooled everyone for years." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but I won't make that mistake again, and I want you to know that whatever happens with the trial, You'll always be Uncle Addison to my kids. Jessica took a lot from all of us, but she doesn't get to take our family bond. Standing outside the courthouse that day, watching Jessica being transported back to jail in a maximum security vehicle, I realized that her final attack had actually given me something valuable. For the first time in my life, I had seen her mask slip completely. The charming, successful sister who had manipulated everyone around her was gone, replaced by the cold-blooded killer she had always been underneath. The truth was finally out in the open, and there was no going back. Jessica would face justice for her crimes, and I would finally be free from the fear that had shadowed my entire life. The little boy who had tumbled down basement stairs, the teenager who had been poisoned at family dinners, the young man who had nearly died from a birthday cake attack. That victim was finally going to see his abuser held accountable for 2 decades of systematic torture. 8 months later, Jessica's trial concluded with a guilty verdict on all charges. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding her responsible for first-degree murder, attempted murder, aggravated assault, fraud, and conspiracy. Judge Morrison sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 50 years for the multiple fraud convictions. During the sentencing hearing, I was given the opportunity to deliver a victim impact statement. Standing at the podium in that same courtroom where Jessica had tried to kill me, I looked directly at her as I spoke. Jessica, you stole 28 years of my life. I said, my voice steady and clear. You made me question my own memories, doubt my own experiences, and believe that I deserved the pain you caused me. But you didn't break me. Despite everything you did, the skull fractures, the poisoning, the psychological torture, I survived. And now I'm going to make sure that something good comes from all the evil you've done. Jessica stared back at me with the same cold expression she had worn throughout the trial. Even facing life in prison, she showed no remorse, no acknowledgement of the harm she had caused. In her mind, she was still the victim of everyone else's jealousy and betrayal. Judge Morrison's final words to Jessica were particularly memorable. In my 3 decades on this bench, I have never encountered a defendant who showed such complete lack of empathy for her victims. You systematically tortured and murdered people who trusted you, and even now you show no understanding of the suffering you've caused. Society is safer with you permanently removed from it. My parents ultimately accepted a plea deal that resulted in 2 years of probation and community service. In exchange for their testimony against Jessica, they were required to attend counseling and perform 500 hours of volunteer work with domestic violence organizations. The plea agreement also included a permanent restraining order, preventing them from contacting me without my explicit permission. The day after Jessica's sentencing, I drove to the cemetery where Grandpa William was buried. His headstone now included new dates reflecting the true circumstances of his death, and I brought fresh flowers to replace the ones Jessica had been placing there, as part of her elaborate charade of grief. I'm sorry it took so long, Grandpa, I said quietly, but she's never going to hurt anyone else again. Using the settlement money from Jessica's victims' compensation fund and my grandfather's recovered inheritance, Sarah and I established the William Henderson Foundation for Family Violence Prevention. The organization focuses specifically on sibling abuse awareness, family gaslighting, recognition, and support for adult survivors of childhood domestic violence. Our first major initiative was creating educational materials for healthcare providers about recognizing patterns of family abuse that might be dismissed as normal sibling rivalry. Dr. Patricia Williams from St. Mary's Hospital became our medical advisor, helping to train emergency room staff to identify suspicious injury patterns and ask the right questions. Marcus divorced Jessica and received full custody of Emma and Tyler. He also changed their last names to his family name to protect them from any association with Jessica's crimes. The children are in therapy to help them process their mother's actions, but they're resilient and surrounded by love from Marcus's extended family. Uncle Addison, 6-year-old Emma said to me at her 7th birthday party, "Daddy told me that some people do bad things, but that doesn't mean all families are scary. Our new family is safe, right?" "Absolutely safe," I assured her, giving her a hug. "And if anyone ever makes you feel unsafe, you tell me or Daddy right away, okay?" Sarah and I got married 18 months after Jessica's conviction in a small ceremony attended by our chosen family. Marcus and the children, Detective Torres, and his wife, Dr. Williams, and the close friends who had supported us through the legal proceedings. We deliberately chose a date that had no connection to any of the traumatic anniversaries from my past, creating a new tradition built on love rather than fear. For our honeymoon, we traveled to Ireland, a place Jessica had never been and could never contaminate with her presence. Standing on the cliffs of County Cork watching the sunset over the Atlantic Ocean, I finally felt completely free from the shadow she had cast over my life. We now live in a different state in a house that Jessica has never seen and can never find. I work as a victim advocate using my experience to help other survivors navigate the legal system and rebuild their lives after trauma. Sarah completed her master's degree in social work and specializes in family therapy for abuse survivors. The nightmares stopped about 2 years after Jessica's conviction. The chronic headaches from repeated head trauma have improved with treatment from a neurologist who specializes in traumatic brain injury. Most importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts about people and situations without second-guessing myself the way I did for so many years. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry about losing my original family, or if I miss the parents who failed to protect me. The honest answer is that I grieved for the family I thought I had, but I don't miss the dysfunction and danger that actually existed. The family I've built with Sarah, Marcus, and the children is healthier and stronger than anything I experienced growing up. Detective Torres, who has become a close friend over the years, recently told me that Jessica has made several attempts to contact me from prison. She sends letters claiming to have found religion and wanting to apologize for her actions. But her words are carefully chosen to avoid admitting legal guilt, and the underlying tone still suggests that she sees herself as the real victim of circumstances beyond her control. Some people are genuinely capable of change and redemption. Detective Torres explained when I asked whether I should respond to her letters. But Jessica isn't one of them. Her brain is literally wired differently. She doesn't feel empathy the way normal people do, and she doesn't experience genuine remorse. Any apology from her would be another manipulation. I've chosen not to respond to Jessica's letters, and I've instructed the prison to stop forwarding them to me. She took 28 years of my life through fear, manipulation, and violence. I won't give her any more of my time or emotional energy. Instead, I focus on the future I'm building with people who genuinely love and support me. Sarah and I are expecting our first child next spring, a daughter we plan to name Grace, after my grandmother, who always made me feel safe and valued. We're excited to raise her in an environment where kindness is rewarded, trust is earned, and family means protection rather than danger. The William Henderson Foundation has now helped over 300 families recognize and escape situations involving sibling abuse. We've trained more than 50 healthcare providers to identify suspicious patterns and ask appropriate questions. Most importantly, we've created a support network for adult survivors who, like me, spent years believing that systematic abuse was normal family behavior. Last month, I received a letter from a young man whose older brother had been poisoning him for 2 years. He recognized the pattern after reading one of our educational brochures at his doctor's office. Thanks to early intervention, he survived, and his brother is now facing attempted murder charges. Knowing that our foundation prevented another family from experiencing the tragedy that devastated mine gives meaning to everything Jessica put me through. Standing in our backyard garden today, watching Sarah plant flowers for next spring's bloom, I'm struck by how different my life is from what Jessica intended. She wanted me dead or broken, isolated from love and support. Instead, I'm surrounded by people who value my safety and happiness. I'm building something positive from the ashes of her destruction. The little boy who was pushed down basement stairs grew up to become a man who protects other children. The teenager who was slowly poisoned became an adult who helps other survivors find justice. The young man who nearly died from a birthday cake attack became someone who turns trauma into triumph. Jessica thought she was writing the story of my life, but she was wrong. She was just one chapter in a much longer book. The painful beginning that makes the happy ending even more meaningful. And unlike her story, which ended with isolation and imprisonment, mine continues to grow with each day of safety, love, and purpose. Every morning when I wake up next to Sarah, every time I hear Emma and Tyler laughing in our backyard, every letter we receive from a survivor who found help through our foundation, I'm reminded that healing is possible and that good people can overcome even the most calculated evil. To anyone watching this who might be experiencing family abuse that's been dismissed as normal sibling rivalry or childhood roughhousing, trust your instincts. If someone in your family consistently hurts you and then convinces everyone it was an accident, that's not normal. If you have mysterious injuries, unexplained illnesses, or a pattern of accidents around one particular family member, seek help from professionals outside your family system. The people who are supposed to love and protect you should never make you feel unsafe in your own home. Real family members celebrate your successes, support your dreams, and prioritize your well-being over their own convenience or reputation. Anyone who consistently harms you, regardless of their relationship to you, is not acting out of love. Have you ever experienced family members dismissing obvious abuse as normal sibling behavior? And how did you finally get the help you needed? Your story could help other viewers recognize dangerous patterns in their own families. Please share your experiences in the comments below. Hit the like button. If this story resonated with you, subscribe for more survivor stories and share this video with anyone who might benefit from learning about sibling abuse awareness. Thank you for joining me on this journey from victim to survivor to advocate. Remember that no matter how dark your current situation might seem, there are people who will believe you, support you, and help you build a safer future. You deserve to be protected, not hurt by the people who claim to love you. Until next time, stay safe, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that systematic abuse is normal family behavior. You are worth fighting for, and your story matters.